Hi, my name is Hala, and today I would like to present to you my approach to utilizing architecture as a medium of communication using multisensory spatial experiences. As Susan already mentioned, I'm an architect, scenographer, and a media artist. I started with a degree in architecture, and from that I started experimenting the applications of digital design and fabrication, as well as generative design and 3D printing on smaller objects, and then the emergence of the digital and the physical spaces through spatial experiences that celebrate various disciplines, including music, light, movement, and projections, as well as awakening architecture through projection mapping, and currently also the integration of interaction, design, and hands-on experiences to create spaces of communication or immersive experiences that enable visitors to live briefly, kind of in another world. In a way, enabling spaces and objects to communicate with us through all our senses, because we are sensory beings, or at least I know I was. We started exploring our environments and surroundings through all our senses. Our touch was actually our first interface into the physical world, and yet now, in today's world, we are immersed in digital environments, and we are even using digital devices to perceive our physical spaces. So for us, exhibition designers and communication designers, we have this challenge of how can we bring our visitors back into the physical world, how can we immerse them in a real world spatial experience. And for that, spatial design or architecture actually enables us, unlike other design disciplines, to design beyond the visual, beyond the haptic, and to try to incorporate our other senses, but also our wisdom of the body. How do we move within the space? How do we perceive our environment? How does our mind interpret our sensory interactions? Because sensory design is not just about the shape of things, but it's also about how things shape us, how they shape our behavior, our emotions, and our truth. So designing multisensory experiences can enable us to create spatial experiences that communicate with the inhabitants, maybe on a deeper or emotional level. And I would like to show a few projects that I have completed recently with amazing teams of interdisciplinary designers, and the approaches that we applied for creating the experiences. Design for the feeling. This project is currently the Jordan Pavilion at the EXPO. On the right side is an image of the famous Siq, which is a stone-carved gorge in Jordan. It's a narrow pathway leading to the heritage city of Petra. And this is our geometric interpretation of the experience. We wanted to design the feeling of actually being in such a space. And what we did is we created this geometric sculpture that is actually made out of this one wood panel that is repeated 440 times and then slightly rotated in the direction of the movement to create this walk-in sculpture. And although the sculpture is actually static, but the movement of the architecture interacts visually with the visitor walking through the space, because to them, as they are moving and the architecture is rotating, it's creating different spaces of intimacy or of light, shades, and shadows. And this sculpture is enhanced with a sound and scent installation, because scent is actually one of our most strongest senses, because it has a direct connection to the memory region of our brain. So for example, as a visitor, I'm walking through this narrow space and I hear the sound of fire burning, and then I smell the scent of Bedouin sage tea, which can be an abstract experience for a foreign visitor, but that can trigger anticipation and maybe imagination. But for the Jordanian visitor, it could, or someone who has been there, it can trigger nostalgia or a memory of being to this land. And still, there was no way of detaching our visitors from their smartphones, but at least we tried to engage them in different sensory experiences. Design for the movement. As you saw in the previous example, that the movement was actually part of the spatial experience. And for this example, the Belgian pavilion, we wanted to utilize Belgian comic culture and storytelling as a methodology to create the architectural storytelling. So we collaborated with Belgian comic illustrators to create a full-scale illustration that is the main visual encounter for the visitor when they enter the space. And we put the visitor at the heart of this experience and then subtracted the frames with the content and moved them within the 3D environment and rearranged them around our visitors. And then we extruded the content in the form of kind of 3D illustrated comic environments to create this walk-in comic world of 3D frames and 3D environments where the visitors are actually moving between these frames, and with their choice of movement, they are kind of creating their own order of this comic strip and experiencing the space at their own pace without having to follow an arrow or a signage system. Design for interaction. Now, interaction in exhibition design doesn't necessarily mean a digital touchscreen or a QR code that I have to scan. Interaction of the visitors with the space is also as important, like how they transition from one space to the other, the feeling of the material, and how they move around and within and with each other. And for this installation, we created an interactive experience that is actually separated from the exhibition space with only a simple string curtain, completely projected with visual projections. And there was, entering the interactive zone, they had 4 interactive points. Each is indicated with shimmering lights on the floor, and each zone was connected to one musical instrument. So the visitor had to cross through the visual projections to the other side of the exhibition, and they intuitively would move to the interactive zone, and immediately moving, they would sense their presence within the space as the sound changes, and they know that they actually changed something within. And the more visitors there are within the environment, the richer the sound composition became, because it activated all the different sound instruments and kind of united all these strangers from different countries of the world in one unanimous language of music. And with them moving around also behind the projection, for the visitor outside, they become kind of part of the main exhibition space as they move as dancing shadows within the projection space. Design for participation. I want to show you one of my favorite projects, die, which is an interdisciplinary project that I have completed with a big team of students in Weimar, under the creative direction of artist Krzysztof Wodiczko. Krzysztof Wodiczko is a pioneering artist in projection whose work is known for awakening architecture and monuments through projection to speak on behalf of marginalized people or war veterans or people with trauma, just individuals who have difficulties of expressing and telling their stories and experiencing experiences, especially in public space. And in this project, we worked with refugees in Weimar, or we call them the newcomers of Weimar, and the citizens of the city, to awaken the famous monument, Goethe and Schiller, at the theater square, and to have them speak on behalf of these newcomers and tell their stories. So for our live performance, we had a studio set in the theater lobby, and we recorded the protagonists live, and this projection was done immediately on the sculpture, and then the visitors, or let's say the audience at the theater square, could actually become participants. They could go up on a dedicated platform and speak to the protagonist and engage in a public discourse. So you can see here our studio. It was a bit uncomfortable for the protagonists because they had to stand in the same position as Goethe and Schiller. And we recorded only their faces and their arm movement. And this was immediately like kind of post-produced and mapped directly on the sculpture outside. And for the audience, when they saw the on-air sign on this platform, that means that they were able, after they have heard the stories, to go up and speak directly to the monument. And the protagonists inside were able to see who is speaking with them on this tiny screen. And for them, this made it also a bit easier to express, because their projection on the statue kind of created this blurriness, and they were not easily recognized in public space. And this interaction kind of created the whole, or turned the whole public space into a platform for democratic discourse. And I would like to show you a video of how this actually looked like. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the thought-through integration of sensory interactions within the space enables us to create experiences that could communicate with our inhabitants on a deeper and an emotional level. And also, when we integrate the right content, we can create memorable experiences that hopefully would have an everlasting impact. So, thank you.